Welcome back, everyone. This is the finale on What If the Transformers Were in High School. DXD. I do not own the Transformers and DXD or any of the characters in this video. Chapter 8. Around a day later. At the Hudu residence. Your choice. Home. Issy was making a quick recovery. The wound looked like it was never there thanks to the kind healing magic of Asia. The residence had guests in the form of primarily mini-cons, but there were other guests. Two small-bodied Transformers, a scout who kept his name secretive at the moment, and the Dinobot and the 5 prominent otherworlders. Twilight Sparkle was making food in the kitchen for the 2 stowaway children, Thomas and Maria. The young boy's parents were doing other things coincidentally concerning Issy himself. Sean was figuring out how to train Issy to be more ready to face some of the absurdly powerful Decepticons, while his wife tended to the boy's injuries to ensure they were healing correctly and no nerve damage was remaining. You mentioned how you're a doctor. Riaz asked Rosa, to which she interrupted. Technically, a neurosurgeon, but I made it a point to study other facets of medical professions. Right, Riaz added. Neurosurgeon, your primary job there is medicinal practices with the nervous system. I seem to recall that is not an easy job to learn from. Your precision is practically perfection itself, meaning you were taught by someone. And you want to know who taught me? Rosa asked as Riaz gave a smile as her answer. Rosa then answered. It was Stephen Strange, or as he's known now, Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme from the Marvel comic universe, and an ally of ours. Irina replied to this answer. Oh, I've heard of him. Before I became an agent of the church, I wanted to be a magician like him and even collected quite a few of the comics he appeared in. To think you were taught by a superhero to be a doctor. Rosa's neutral face turned sour a little as she replied. He's an arrogant, pushy, egomaniac when he tutored me in his craft. Just because my hands are the kind of steadiness that's ideal for a precision surgeon. If the story's Twilight, Sean, and yourself are anything to go by, I believe it. Akano said as she hugged Issy's sore arm. Those same stories also make you out to be an incredibly talented Pokémon trainer, budding medical practitioner, and actress. You must be quite a multi-talented, gifted individual, Rosa. If it wasn't for the fact I was a Pokémon trainer longer than she has, Rosa would be a more talented and accomplished trainer than I am. And the Pokémon she would train would be much stronger than mine. Sean added as he drew in the air with his finger the ideas that were coming from his mind. Issy had his thoughts linger for some time about the Decepticons, especially Sixit. He asked to get back on the topic regarding their earlier discussions about the Decepticons' plans. Hey Hashimoto, Twilight, he began. Is there anyone who can beat that Sixit guy? Not just survive, but defeat him soundly, Twilight inquired as she handed the 2 stowaway children food. You mean, who could defeat Sixit in a fight, and not simply be someone who only survived an encounter with the Six Changer? Issy nodded, and the disguised princess mulled it over. Then Twilight answered, I'm not entirely sure if she can, but I think Nightbird could theoretically defeat Six-Shot. Asia asked. Who's Nightbird? Zenobia added. I agree. Who is this Nightbird bot? Especially with a name that sounds so sinister. Sean looked at Twilight and asked. This is the first I've heard of Nightbird, and I'm familiar with the character who bears the name, Organization 13. Kingdom Hearts. Twilight answered. Well, Optimus and a few of the other Autobot officers like Ultra Magnus told me this quite recently. A few months before this whole ordeal we are currently in. Nightbird is a creation of the Nebulon robotics researcher, Dr. Hiro Fukuyama. He was a part of the Nebulos Global Defense Agency that works closely with the Autobots in their frequent battles against the Decepticons. He and several other scientists created, until recently, a secretive project called Project Skywatch, an initiative that the Nebulon people effectively create their own Transformers to bolster the Autobots' dwindling numbers. Rosa remarked as she sat beside her son and his best friend. Oh, I've heard about that from Miss Fairburn. I've heard that it was an expensive failure, even though they did succeed in bringing 10 brand new Cybertronians to life. Twilight continued after a brief chuckle. Yeah, that's the one. They consider Project Skywatch a failure because the 10 Transformers they did create relied on protoforms. They thought that because Cybertronians have a genetic structure, they could be cloned to produce more protoforms. But they couldn't, so they were stuck with 10 when the governments wanted 1,000 by the first year of the project's inception. Riaz commented, that would be quite frustrating, especially if, from what I'm gathering, they put enough money into this project to be its own country. True. Twilight answered as she took a sip of tea. But Optimus and I consider it a success because they ultimately did succeed and effectively create man-made transformers, even if they cheated a little by using transformer protoforms as a base. Because of the prototypes, the Skywatch Autobots were excessively powerful and had abilities that almost no other transformers possess. Interesting, Kaiba pointed out. But that doesn't explain why you think this Nightbird character could defeat Sixit. Twilight laughed a little as she replied, yes, fair enough. Well, it was a bit of context, because Project Skywatch was at least a decade old by now. During the same time, me and my friends, ponies, and Pokemon trainers were in an extra-dimensional world nicknamed the Hollow Earth, facing a demon who, at least in their world, was the folkloric villain, Yamada no Orochi. The Occult Research Club looked at Sean and Rosa with puzzled faces, which Sean responded to their stares. A story for another time. Twilight then began explaining Nightbird in detail. Nightbird was the very first of these 10 bots, and Dr. Fukuyama was in charge of her design. Using all his know-how on robotics, he designed Nightbird as a ninja, purely for the sake of bettering the Nebulon people. She was also, in terms of overall power, speed, and such, the most powerful of the 10 Autobots. Aren't ninjas assassins? Riaz asked perplexedly. Wouldn't that send the wrong message? Twilight laughed as she said, funnily enough, Optimus thought the same thing, but to be honest, I have no clue why Fukuyama thought a ninja would be a good idea for a robot for peace. Maria chimed in. Maybe he just wanted to build a ninja robot because it's a ninja robot. That comment made everyone, especially Issy, Riaz, Sean, and Twilight burst hysterically in an uproar of laughter. Falcha just looked at them and said to herself, organic's so weird and hypocritical. Twirl looked at her team leader and said, don't be like that. That's what makes them so much fun to be around, and why some of them are so nice to us. Falcha rolled her eyes in a yeah, I get it kind of manner as Twilight managed to stifle her laughter to continue. Yeah, perhaps that's why Maria, she said as the human-disguised alicorn patted the little girl on the head. But continuing, the Decepticons eventually caught wind of Project Skywatch, and around 15 of them, led by Megatron himself, broke into the military research facility. Nightbird and the other man-made transformers were, because of how the Skywatch scientists constructed them, the 10 transformers were horrendously underprepared to face the Decepticons because their minds haven't quite matured yet to be battle-ready, even lacking the proper training. They were practically children because of how they were brought up. The Autobots and military personnel that was guarding the facility were overrun. About 200 Autobots and 30,000 Nebulon soldiers were stationed there, and only 4 members of the combined forces survived the assault with serious injuries. Riaz and the others were shocked that many soldiers, both Autobot and Nebulons, were wiped out by just 15 Decepticons. And only 4 of those soldiers combined survived the attack. Who survived? Irina asked, to which Twilight answered, well, as far as Nebulon natives, I recall hearing they were a medic, a general, and a pilot. As for the Autobots, the lone survivor was Omega Supreme, who was stationed to guard the facility under Optimus Prime's orders. Was Megatron trying to destroy the man-made Transformers? Akano asked, worried about the fate of the Skywatch Transformers, especially hearing the 10 bots were practically children. Twilight Sparkle answered in a matter-of-fact-like manner, no, quite the opposite. Megatron wanted to turn them into Decepticons and use them against the Autobots. The soldiers stationed to defend those 10 Autobots fought bravely, especially an Autobot couple named Ardley and Lantern. They sacrificed their own lives to not allow Megatron to steal them all. He only managed to steal Nightbird away, which wasn't too hard for him as she was, heartbroken, to say the least, when the attack killed her creator, who she viewed as a father. The Overseer was shocked at hearing this, and were further shocked when Twilight continued further. Nightbird remained captive by the Decepticons for days since the incident, and was subjected to. Twilight shuddered as she struggled to push past this part. Horrific experiments, carried out by the 2 mad scientists of the Decepticons, Shockwave and Joxus. They took advantage that humans built most of her components, so they stripped her of what made Nightbird born of Nebulos, and replaced those parts with harvested organs from Shockwave's experiments on Autobots. He and Joxus then subjected Nightbird to violent, forceful, and agonizing reprogramming with something called a robo-smasher. For years, Nightbird was brainwashed into being a Decepticon assassin, until a year or two ago, with help from another of her fellow Skywatch Autobots, Jinrai, he managed to get through to her, and she overrode her reprogramming enough for Optimus to put her in stasis lock. And with help from Perceptor, Brainstorm, and Chrome Dome, they barely managed to get rid of all her Decepticon programming. Sean couldn't help but say, "Geez, that sounds truly despicable to me. No human would even stomach such cruelty, and if they did, they wouldn't be human at all." The way it sounds, Nightbird sounds like she was cut open. Her organs were removed and replaced with others, and suffered through brainwashing. The Kuo Academy students and the teacher were horrified at the things this Autobot went through. Twilight continued further, in a way no organic being could even imagine, which is really frustrating, because Nightbird before that was a very kind and gentle Autobot, approachable, and even to some of the male soldiers, very cute. She managed to return somewhat normal, but she's suffered horrendous psychological trauma, and it has been eating away at her mind. She was fully aware of her actions, all the horrible things she did as a Decepticon puppet, killing innocent people, cruelly torturing those who were supposed to be her allies before, especially since she later confirmed it with me when I got the chance to meet her. Nightbird went through all of the procedures in the same way Grimlock did, fully awake and conscious. From that, she ended up telling me that she ended up learning from a group of Cybertronian ninjas whose name roughly translates to the Sixth Clan, and taught her how to fight. That made all the girls gasp in sheer disbelief. They literally couldn't imagine what an experience like that would feel like. They have tried, and couldn't contemplate it halfway. It was simply too horrific to imagine as an organic being. Issy was absolutely furious when he heard all that done to, who sounded like a robot version of Asia, personality-wise so to speak. Riaz noticed that Issy had hate in his eyes, a hate she rarely saw in humans, let alone devils, directed at the Decepticons, those sick evil bastards. Issy shouted angrily as Sean and Rosa quickly covered young Thomas and Maria's ears. They need to pay. Every last Decepticon. Twilight was shocked by Issy's statement. Observing them, even Falcha had to agree with Issy, especially hearing what a nice bot went through and how it ultimately affected her. She was visibly pissed, even with her battle mask active. She looked ready to maim and murder the next closest Decepticon to her present location. She didn't give a damn if it may tip the cons to their base's location. She wants to kill a con, didn't matter who, aside from Megatron. Now that you brought it up, Twilight, Sean asked as he picked up the drowsy Thomas and Maria. Who else was present at the attack? Twilight thought about it for several seconds, then answered a bit unsure herself. Well, after hearing the reports and finding whatever evidence was left, I recall that only 11 of those 15 were identified, and that includes Megatron. She started to count her fingers as she named the known Decepticons. There was a trio of Seekers named Redwing, Sandstorm, and Hotlink. There were 4 of the 5 Combaticons, someone the medic identified as Gigatron, and then an unknown bulky grunt who constantly shouted, "For the glory of Megatron," and blew things up constantly. Sean, Rosa, Twirl, Falcha, Slash, and the other worlders all said in unison in an "of course that is who it is" tone and an unamused expression on their faces. Lugnut, Rosa added with a sigh. That loud mouth with absolutely no brain is idiocy personified. Too stupid to shut up, too stupid to show any restraint, and too much for anyone to spend 5 seconds with before they want to freaking destroy that moron. That annoying. Riaz asked, to which Falcha replied, "Imagine the most idiotic, annoying son of a bitch who you would massacre if they utter so much as a syllable. And you would rather be annoyed by them than talk to Lugnut for anything longer than 10 seconds. He's also one of the Khan's most infamous muscle. He has freaking collapsed buildings the size of mountains here on Earth by punching the daylights out of them, especially since he has pressure-sensitive gravity generators that he uses to punch and kill everything. And he's durable as hell," Akano remarked. "My, this Lugnut sounds like an absolute cockroach by your tone, Falcha," Slash replied to Akano's statement. "Oh, he is. And I don't swear like Miss Italian Don here. He's freaking tough, and very stupidly destructive. And like the insect, Lugnut doesn't stay down. Nightbird when she was under the Decepticons' control was just as annoying to deal with. just in a different manner, Twilight remarked as she took a sip of tea. She was as slippery as an eel, and had all kinds of tricks and tools that afforded her a comparison to Batman in escape artistry by some of the Justice League. No doubt thanks to her training from the elusive Six Clan. Why do I feel that I somehow know this Six Clan is related to Sixit? Koneko asked. Sean answered for Twilight. Because Sixit was once a member of this secretive, neutral group, and he's the most well-known member of the Six Clan. That explains a lot, Rossweiss remarked. Then she asked, now I want to know what Nightbird and this Jinrai fellow look like, Twilight answered, gathering the dishes left by Thomas and Maria. Fukuyama had the Skywatch Transformers modeled after some of the Autobots themselves, and a couple of Decepticons. Nightbird takes most cues in appearance from two Autobots, Chromia and Arcee. As for Jinrai, he was made in the image of Optimus Prime himself and was intended to be the commander of the would-be thousands of Project Skywatch. Sometimes he's called God Jinrai by the Nebulans due to his impressive ability to survive and completely recover from injuries that would mean certain death, even by the Transformers standards. There were a few others, but I'm ashamed to admit I forgot most of their names. Although, I have to admit that I am certain that one of them was Jinrai twin brother. Much like Sideswipe with his twin, Sunstreaker, Sean opened up his smartphone and scrolled through the photo app and showed an image to the Kuo Academy students and the teacher, then said, I'm not sure if this is what Twilight meant she looked like, but this is more or less what Nightbird looks like to me and Rosa, as a fictional character in our world. Whoa, Riaz said with interest. I see what you mean by Nightbird being a ninja robot, Issy remarked with a squint. Yeah, I guess she's nice looking for a robotic being. But I don't see how she would be viewed as cute as you described her, Twilight replied. Oh, she could remove that faceplate of hers, revealing the face hidden under it. And truthfully, even made of metal, Nightbird had a very human-like face, not that surprising considering she was built by human-like beings like the Nebulans. I would say if I could make a comparison, Nightbird's face sort of looks like a metal version of Rossweiss's face. The ex-Valkyrie did a spit take as in a second. Everyone stared at her with confused, surprised, or curious faces. She stuttered. Wait a minute, are you saying Nightbird and I look alike? Twilight answered her in between giggles. Kind of. There are clear, distinctive facial structure differences, but in the right lighting and if you squint, the two of you could pass off as each other's copies. Can you recall any more of these Project Skywatch Autobots? Irina asked, quite curious about who else was made. Twilight answered, well, there was one other who comes to mind, but unfortunately, he's no longer with us. His name was Lightfoot, and he sacrificed his life to prevent a tear in spacetime from swallowing our reality about 4 years ago. As a matter of fact, the date today marks the anniversary of Lightfoot's sacrifice. He was well known among the Nebulans, and revered as fondly as the United States President, Abraham Lincoln by them. Now, there are only 9 of them left alive, but one of them was crippled beyond repair, Riaz said. That's very touching, and based on what you've said, he is regarded as a hero of Nebulos, more like the entire universe. Twilight replied, the tear he gave his life to close was a significant threat to all of us. Enough so for the Autobots and Decepticons to form a ceasefire to face a common enemy, as this tear in spacetime led to an antimatter reality known as the Dead Universe. The Dead Universe? Asia asked nervously as she wrapped her arms around Issy's. Twilight answered the blonde's question. Yeah, the best way to describe it well. It's something like an undead reality, where everything in it, plants, animals, planets, and stars, were dark matter facsimiles to zombies, even if they don't look like zombies, that send a chill up everyone's spine. A literal undead reality. That sounds absolutely horrifying. Twilight added, it's even more dangerous as it could infect your mind just from a single touch, and gives you unfathomable powers in exchange for being completely subservient to the dead universe itself. And it worsens your bad qualities to a ridiculous degree. One of their worst slaves was a bot named Nova Prime, one of Optimus' predecessors. And Evil Prime. Akano wondered aloud, my, that's hard to believe. Twirl overheard the conversation enough to chip in, and answered the half-fallen angel. Not as hard to believe as you think. After the 13 primes that preceded all Cybertronians, most of the bots who wore the title of Prime were, to quote you humans, pretenders to the throne. They were Prime only in name. They all started with noble intentions. But like you humans say about power, absolute power corrupts absolutely, Rossweiss said. which Twirl nodded in agreement, continuing. Yeah, and the worst offenders were found to have been Nova Prime, who was a warmongering, murderous, and cruel tyrant who hid his actions behind a knightly persona and hero of the people, the Overseer. Didn't like how Nova Prime sounded, and could only imagine how much worse he ended up as a slave to the dead universe. Twirl continued with her little tirade on the Primes and Sentinel Prime, Optimus Prime's immediate predecessor. He was actually a genuinely good guy at first, as he was something like a George Washington before he became a Prime, and it was when the Quintessons first invaded Cybertron and covertly enslaved the planet's people. He led the war against the Quintessons, but due to a plague of rust, he isolated Cybertron from its colony worlds, and quickly became just as power-hungry, arrogant, and cruel as the other false primes. The group listened into this nugget of information. Especially the observant ones who noticed Twirl's voice and body language said that the Sentinel Prime was responsible for more than one transgression. He's also responsible for a chain of events that ultimately started the war between the Autobots and Decepticons from rationing, energon to extreme levels that left much Cybertronian life starving to death, to the caste system that led to a divide between the privileged and underprivileged that only fueled the hatred between them. Sean added, which only infuriated us more and more towards the Decepticons. I recall you mentioning some time ago that Optimus wasn't always a Prime, that he was an archivist of sorts. Akano remarked, to which Rosa was about to reply, honestly, that's a story and a half for another time. Sean said instead as he sat beside his wife. The scout, who kept his name close to Spark, pressed his fingers to the side of his head, which the Kuo town residents recall is him listening to the comlink. His expression developed into surprise as he quietly accepted something from who he was talking to, then said to Issy, hey perverted dragon boy. Yes, was all Issy could say as the scout trooper ordered. Turn on your television set. Set it to the global news station now. I just got a statement from Sideswipe about something that seems to be involved with the Decepticons. Issy quickly turned on his television set and set the channel to the Japanese news station that covers primarily national and international news. Then everyone in the room listened to the news anchors intently, wondering what made Sideswipe say that to the nameless scout. Justin. Another archaeological site was found decimated by unknown causes. The 9th case found across the globe these past few months. The site is left in shambles, located 24 miles south of Paris, France. Investigators are left puzzled by the disappearance of many archaeologists and volunteers, as families pray for any news that their loved ones are safe. This site differs from most of the others as there were signs that a violent attack was present at this site. The first case being the closest to this most recent development. Your choice? Chilling. The news provided was more chilling than any horror film could ever match. There was a series of unexplained attacks at 9 archaeological sites across the globe, most of which the victims are missing, if there's evidence left at all. Even more curious are some specific artifacts or research notes, papers, and such on the sites were stolen, and plenty of claw marks and blast marks that look to belong to weapons or creatures the size of jets. A few of these sites have strong indications that the archaeologists and volunteers at the sites were killed, with numerous blood splatters across the crime scenes, or charred outlines of victims being burned to death into cinders. What made the news even more chilling was the fact that they knew something that the general public wasn't aware of. Slash took a look at the crime scenes through the televisions and knew this was the work of one of 2 teams. Who could have done this? Irina asked as Slash stated, among the Decepticons, there are 2 teams in mind. For the level of destruction we've seen on those sites, it's either the work of the Terracons, which we'd be screwed if they're with Megatron, or the Predacons, which is the same, but we'd be triply screwed if they're behind this. Terracons, Predacons. Asia replied as Riaz asked, who are the Terracons and the Predacons? Sean answered for the crimson-haired beauty. There are 2 answers each for both names. Firstly, the Terracons was the translated name for what Cybertronians call what we Earthlings would call zombies or ghouls in our language. Zombies. Zenobia squeaked as the honestly ridiculous idea of alien, robot zombies entered her mind, otherwise also called the Sparkleses. The name invoked fear into the more religious or paranormally sensitive of Autobots or Decepticons, so a team of 5 murderous cons with monstrous alt modes took that name as their team's name. Hunger is the leader and transforms into a 2-headed dragon. The other team members are as follows. Blot, the indeterminate ogre-like monster. Ripper Snapper, the land shark. Cutthroat, the hawk-like monster. and Sinnertwin, a twin-headed horned land dragon. They can combine into a monstrous combiner named Abominus, who looks like a dragon crossed with a meat grinder on steroids. The description of the Terrorcons made the collective blood pressure of the Kuo Academy students and teacher drop, especially when Slash added that calling the Terrorcon team heartless, murderous monsters is an apt description of their behavior. Rosa decided to explain the other group of Decepticons to Riaz, Issy, and the other natives of this reality. As for the Predacons, that was the name of, effectively, Cybertron's version of dinosaurs, or filled a similar niche in Cybertron's prehistory. But unlike the Dinobots, those Predacons resembled creatures from Earth's mythology, like dragons or hydras, etc. and such. They sound positively massive if that's the comparison you want to give in your explanation, Akano remarked, to which Rosa further elaborated. Certainly, however, like the Terrorcons, a team took that name to invoke fear into bots, because Predacons were really strong even by a modern Transformers standards. Shockwave used what he learned from Grimlock and his team and applied that knowledge to give the team new alt modes. Based on living creatures on Earth, the Predacon team is led by a con named Razorclaw, an unnervingly calm hunter or strategist who transforms into a robotic lion. The other members are Dive Bomb, a robotic eagle, Headstrong, a robotic rhinoceros, Tantrum, a robotic water buffalo, and Rampage, a robotic tiger. They're mercenaries whose leader is loyal to Megatron, and they can merge into a combiner named Predaking. You seem nervous when you mention Predaking's name. There's a reason for that, I assume, Ross Weiss asked. Rosa shone, and the Autobots took a deep breath as Slash explained. Yes, there is a reason because, among combiners from both sides, Predaking is regarded as the ultimate, the most powerful combiner of them all, Issy asked. Huh. What makes you guys say that? Sean answered. It's a thing regarding combiners as a whole that is a long story. But to give it to you short and simple, combiners have weaknesses that Predaking does not have. Intelligence, dexterity, and reflexes. Other than gods or kaiju, I'd say it's safe to argue that Predaking is the most powerful. Being in any universe based on those merits alone, Kaiba remarked as sweat formed from his head, that certainly makes it clear enough to the power he has, though we are certain that Megatron has the Predacons with him. The nameless scout said, the destruction seen on the television. Optimus is certain that this is the handiwork of the Terracons. That makes it more unnerving for us because, Koneko asked, to which Toro replied, the Terracons were stationed with another group of Decepticons that weren't with Megatron when he arrived here. Who were they stationed with? Kaiba asked, which Twilight grimly answered. They were with a unit under the command of one of Megatron's generals, a vicious Decepticon named Deathsaurus. Gasper asked, which Toro replied. The name pretty much sums up what kind of bot he is. Slash told the secretive scout, hey you, call up Orion and tell him what we have come up with regarding what's on the news. The scout nodded as he did just that. Akano asked what her quote family and quote was thinking. Who's Orion? I ask because I know she isn't referring to the Greek hunter Orion. Orion Pax. Sean answered, which Twilight added, that's Optimus Prime's original name before the title and the matrix of leadership were given to him, and how is a bit of a long story that would probably be best saved for when the Decepticons aren't an imminent threat to us. Riaz nodded as she said, I honestly would like to hear this story now than later, but if you say so based on your voice, I can wait. Your choice. The scout called up Optimus Prime at the Autobot base and said, Optimus Prime, sir, please answer. We may have deduced more of Megatron's troops, with the possibility of one of his generals being here. I read you loud and clear. Optimus responded, with the scout and Slash explaining to him what they had discussed with Riaz Peerage. After about 10 minutes, Optimus got all the necessary information and replied, after a minute of reflection, to the information. This is most troubling if your reasoning is true. Then we will have to plan for not only the Terracons, but for Deathsaurus himself. His cruelty and ferocity are well known throughout our universe, having once fought Power Girl and Wonder Woman within an inch of their lives. As I recall, he used extremely dirty tactics when he fought those two, holding hostages using kryptonite gas bombs. and causing exorbitant collateral damage to distract the two, Twilight added, which really got under Rhea's skin hearing what this Decepticon general did to beat two extremely powerful superheroines. Slash commented as she twirled a glowing energy dagger around her fingers. I know his techniques and psychological patterns quite well. Excluding you, Orion, the only ones who could face and defeat Deathsaurus are Power Girl, Twilight Sparkle, Victorian, and Star Saber. But only if 1. Star Saber was here, and 2. If all 4 combatants used teamwork that borders perfection. Twilight was taken aback by this statement. Me. Wouldn't Sean and Rosa work better? They're both much stronger than me. Slash explained. He's faced beings that fit those two's power classes before and has counters in place for them. Deathsaurus is a zealot for carnage, but he's very competent in combat. I know for a fact he hasn't faced alicorn magic before, and unless he evades destruction at your hands for, say 10 confrontations, your magic might be the key to slaying the Decepticon Emperor of Carnage. Twilight mulled it over as Optimus assures the Alicorn Princess that she can do it. Rhea's notes that Twilight's magic reserves are astounding, even for gods, and detects a modesty or uncertainty in her body language about her strength. The heiress has to wonder why this is so. She knows from past talks that Twilight is no stranger to conflicts in that eternal war between good and evil. But what could have happened to result in a situation where, despite having more power than most deities at her disposal, but she is uncertain that she is strong enough to even make a difference. Rhea thinks this might have something to do with the Decepticons, because she got hints that despite winning a few battles, Twilight might have still lost somehow. Or, it could have been something that she was missing to enable her confidence to come in full swing. The young devil could empathize with her on some level, especially regarding the Decepticons being the one thing they might have in common in terms of being underprepared for facing an army of mechanical organisms from another planet. Her thoughts were brought back to the group when she heard the voice of Cliffjumper hailing the Autobot base, which they were using to communicate with Optimus Prime with. Hey, Optimus. This is Cliffjumper. Do you read me? Optimus spoke to the soldier. We read you loud and clear, Cliffjumper. I was talking with those at the Hudu household, but go ahead. What do you have to report? Listen, you are not gonna believe what Power Girl, Nat, and I found Prime. Rhea replied. Well, just say it already. Cliffjumper, Optimus added. I share Rhea's Gremory's sentiments. Cliffjumper, what did you find? Cliffjumper said next. His discovery. We've found one of Shockwave's laboratories on Earth. Meanwhile, the Decepticon base. Villains of a sort. Kingdom Hearts. Megatron sat on his makeshift throne, staring at the monitors with an irritated, almost furious look. But one look into his eyes could immediately tell that something was occupying the warmonger's mind. Megatron quietly muttered to himself, You will not make me your slave, Ghidorah. You will submit to me, or be destroyed. Despite your overwhelming power, I know you are not invincible, and I will make you pay for this humiliation. Lord Megatron, Soundwave said, to which Megatron snapped. What is it, Soundwave? Soundwave backed off a little, then continued. Sixit and the Combaticons have returned from their distraction of the forces in the underworld, and Sixit has news regarding Carnage's idea. Megatron perked up on his seat as his interest was roused. He ordered, Report. Sixit. Sixit arrived as the Predacon team mobilized behind Soundwave and answered his master. Carnage's suggestion has merits. His plan can work in our favor. The Red Dragon Emperor is powerful enough for Project Titanus to get on its feet, despite me easily defeating him and his comrades. Megatron grinned as he said, Then you and the Predacons know what to do now. Report to the dark side of the moon to disembark through the space bridge. At once, Lord Megatron. Razorclaw bowed as he, Sixit, and the rest of the Predacons walked through a ground bridge. Soundwave opened. Lord Megatron, Dreadwing said through the comlink. There's a visitor on the Nemesis who requests your presence on the deck. Megatron growled quietly as he wanted to kill whoever it was that requested. But he said, Soundwave, assume command of our operations on Earth, until I return. And Starscream had an envious face at Megatron choosing Soundwave over him but was alerted when Megatron named him. He hesitated. Yes, Lord Megatron. Megatron quickly replied to Starscream's question. Know that if you try anything, I have given Soundwave the authority to extinguish your spark. I still haven't forgotten your attempt to use the enigma of combination to become a super combiner. An attempt that cost us the ability to create an army of combiners to wipe the Autobots and their allies out of existence. Starscream cowered as Megatron lurched forward to prove his point, one of the Seeker's clever ruses to avoid getting his spark extinguished before his plans come to fruition. When Megatron entered the ground bridge, Starscream let out a quiet growl at Megatron. Too quiet to make the Decepticon leader retaliate. As Megatron exited through the other side of the portal to the hangar on top of the Nemesis, he was greeted by Dreadwing and some Seekers. He looked out of the hangar doors to see who wanted to speak with him. Megatron walked out onto the deck of his warship, Dreadwing and a squad of Seekers following close behind their leader. Megatron growled at Dreadwing. "So, where is our visitor, Dreadwing? This better not be a joke." "No joke." Megatron, a deep, guttural voice responded to the Decepticon leader. "This has something to do with your progress in acquiring Master Ghidorah's prize." Megatron recognized the serpent-like manner of speaking and looked behind on top of the hangar. He saw a massive mahogany dragon on his ship. The dragon's eyes glowed a fiery yellow. The dragon's head was large enough to swallow Megatron whole, and had pulled its lips back in a snarl-like grin. Megatron sneered bitterly as he said, "Smog, what are you doing here? I thought dragons of your type would want to burn human cities." Smog replied quickly, "That is no longer relevant, since I am no longer a dragon. Now, I am a kaiju like my master. You know this already. He has something to attend to, so he left me and another here to watch you closely should you attempt to betray him." Megatron shuddered with fury. He had anticipated that Ghidorah was heading off to obtain something of value in another reality. Megatron cursed for not expecting Ghidorah to do something he would do if the roles were reversed. Well played, King Ghidorah. I will be sure your destruction is excruciating once I acquire your prize in this reality and make it my weapon against you. Megatron thought as he began to formulate a plan to work around the fact that Smog became present. He must be clever, because unlike the already fairly intelligent Ghidorah, Smog was much more perceptive in sniffing out deception, especially from a Decepticon. End of Chapter 8. Link down to the comments if you want to read the rest of the story. I hope you all enjoy. Goodbye.